Well, hello there.
Hello, friends.
Dear friends, happy Sunday. Thank you for joining us. Today is Sunday, June 2nd, and this is 5 Minutes with Robert, Nasir, and Amy, Nasir, and extra pauses, and you. And thank you for joining us. We are glad you are here. And everything's working. If you were around last week, you know, a little snafu on the technical side, but no, everything is looking good. And I see you in the chat, and you look marvelous. So, let's go. Today is June 2nd. It's Pride Month. Hope you are proud of yourself. I'll be posting some Pride Month stuff on the Facebooks, on the Twitter, on the socials. If you're not already following me there, well, you know what to do. Make that happen. Today is Sunday, June 2nd, the 154th day of this, your best year yet. After today, you've got 212 days left to make it even betterer. And I know you're going to do that. Christmas is in 206 days. I'm counting down. I'm waiting for Santa, his big day. I'm waiting to reread A Christmas Carol.
Wait. Santa still exists.
Well, yes, of course. Here on 5 Minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir, we don't just believe in Santa.
We actually know Santa.
We know Santa. We certainly know Santa Rick.
Yes.
The best Santa.
The best Santa.
The very best of Santas.
Yes.
And on June 2nd, real quick, on this date, a couple of good ones. This was the day in 1989 that the film Dead Poets Society was released.
Oh, nice.
A great movie, an inspiring movie, the kind of movie that makes you say, I want life to be more like that, except if you know the plot. I want also to avoid some of the mistakes that were made in the movie, some of the ways in which one's life might go down the wrong path. But it is a wake-up call to all of us, a wake-up call to find meaning, to find purpose, to find reasons that life can be an end in itself. We're going to be talking about that. I couldn't help but think of that film that was released on this date in 1989 when we went to see the film The Holdovers, which was another private school movie.
I mean, it had its moments, but
it did. It had some of the same elements, but
yeah,
more of a mixed bag, a little more naturalistic, a little more trying real hard not to make anybody too heroic.
I really wanted the movie to be about the guys who ended up leaving and going on the ski trip.
Talk about a plot thread that they just dropped.
I really wanted that, and
it wouldn't have been so bad. But those characters who bow out a quarter of the way through the movie, they were set up as characters.
Yeah,
there were obviously stories there. The guy never got his his mitten back.
Right.
There was if they had just made them non-entities, that would have been fine. They go away and we get only the people we care about left behind. But they started stories with them and they never finished them.
I demand satisfaction.
Damn right.
I want to talk to the manager.
Well, what I want to do is see Dead Poets Society again released on this day, June 2nd, 1989. If you have never seen Dead Poets Society, for example, if you, like me, I will admit to this, if you, like me, were put off by the name of the film, which just sounded stupid to me, don't let that stop you. See that movie and then tell us in the socials or on the chat, one of these episodes, what you thought of it. I want to know. It's also National Cancer Survivors Day, and we have cancer survivors in our circle of friends, in our circle of kins, our kindred spirits. In fact, one of the most important people in our lives is a double survivor. So yes, shout out to all of you who have survived cancer. A huge shout out and our sympathy to those of you who are fighting it. It's a fact of life. It's a fact of reality that the longer we live, the more that becomes what does us in. Now, when I was young, we didn't even always catch it, and sometimes people just died of old age. What do you mean they died of old age? Well, we never found out. No, nowadays, as people are living longer and longer and longer, and it's so cool. But it also means, more of us eventually give in to the C word. So, shout out to all the survivors out there. It is Cancer Survivors Day. A happy birthday. I've got two happy birthdays today. It's Edvard Elgar's birthday, a great composer who, what would we do in our ceremonies without pomp and circumstance? Without the coronation ode? What would we do without those pieces of music?
I was in band, and I would be there. I was one of the select few who got to play in a smaller orchestra. Pomp and circumstance. It just never ended. It just went on, and we kept it going. We kept it going. And I'm sure everybody left that night with that song in their head.
Yeah. It's like, it's one of those pieces of music, and Elgar was like this, that you just assume there was no composer. It's like it always existed. This music must have always existed as long as there were coronations, as long as there were ceremonies. Kind of like John Philip Sousa, you just feel like those marches always existed. Oh wait, somebody wrote that stuff? Yes, they did. So happy birthday, Edvard Elgar, or Edward if you're American. But yes, the other birthday, it is the birthday, we celebrated this one once before, which means we must have done a show on June 2nd before. It is the birthday of the Marquis de Sade. So happy birthday and a celebration to all of you sadists out there.
Oh, no.
I said this the last time we celebrated the Marquis. A lot of the things that the Marquis de Sade did, we talked about this in the context of Oscar Wilde, were only scandalous in his day. Things that nowadays we would just call a mild kink were at the time considered sadistic and terrible. And how could anybody do those terrible things? Now, I know he was a mixed case, and I don't mean to say that everything that he did was okay. But, it's kind of June 2nd, Marquis de Sade's birthday. It's a chance to de-vanilla your life a little bit. I'm going to leave that there.
Well, is actually my mom's birthday today.
Really?
Yeah, June 2nd.
I did not know that.
Yes.
And I'm not going to make a connection there either.
Maybe sometimes. She did come at me with a wooden spoon one time and left some welts. But that was a very, very unusual circumstance when I was a teenager and I was giving her a lot of grief. Not that that was okay.
Yes, yeah. I'm just catching up with the chat here real quick, and week is left, right? Paul, what are you saying there? I don't know. I'm sure there's a meaning behind that eventually I'll figure out.
There's wisdom behind those words somewhere.
Yeah, and Robin is celebrating that the microphones work today. Yes, they do. I did make sure the phantom power. Ooh, phantom power.
Phantom power.
Phantom of the mixer. Phantom power was turned on. So yes, the microphones do work today, and Greg and Christopher are talking music, and the fact that music does repeat itself, and music does repeat itself.
When you said phantom power, I'm like, the shadow knows.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, he does.
Well, man, we got a lot to talk about. So that's all the on this date I'm going to do, but do celebrate the Marquis de Sade's birthday in whatever way is appropriate to you.
You can slap yourself on the hand.
Now, under shameless self-promotion, what are we listening to this week? Well, I listened to.
I've learned a lot. I've listened to many wonderful things.
Yeah, let me jump forward to hot topics. Let me jump forward to the topic.
All right.
Because you see the title of the show is Thanksgiving and a Half.
Yeah.
What do you mean Thanksgiving and a half? Well, it's about a half a year, a couple days after, between now and Thanksgiving. And if you were going to do Thanksgiving twice a year, this is when you would do it. You would balance it out every 6 months. Well, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the gratitude, but to me, gratitude and meaning are tied together. And it was just released yesterday, but I have listened to, in fact, I watched the Richard Dawkins and Ayaan Hirsi Ali discussion.
Yeah, which I just got done with as well.
Now, it's in the show notes if you haven't already seen it going around. Look at the description on YouTube, look at the description on Facebook, and you'll see it in my list of extremely valuable links, the kind of links you should be paying me money for. In fact, some of you do. The title on this one is Theological Bullshit. Oh, they put an asterisk there. They kept it clean.
Poop.
Richard Dawkins
Bulls.
challenges Ayaan Hirsi Ali's newfound Christianity.
Because Christianity is all about love.
It should have been a great discussion.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I know those of you who are listening to this right now, you are exactly the kind of people who could have smacked Richard Dawkins upside the head and said, here's the part you're missing. Christopher, I'm thinking Hitchens now. No, Richard Dawkins was on the right side of history. No, he was on the right side of the argument. But he just didn't bring it.
He wasn't.
He couldn't deliver.
He did not. Well, I mean, he's not an objectivist. He doesn't have the certain concepts that we have. Therefore, he calls himself a cultural Christian. And he's on, as he put it, I'm on it was funny. There was banter back and forth between them, and she's like, "Yes, I'm on Team Christian or Christianity," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm on Team Christianity." Well, it just didn't. I parsed out a lot of the concepts that she was saying was good about Christianity, and it didn't really have a lot to do with Christianity. It had to do a lot with the kind of psychological concepts that have been brought about through, I think, through cognitive behavioral therapy and, just the kinds of things that the new atheists were missing. Things like courtesy, things like being patient and not mocking people just for the sake of laughing at them. So there are certain contextual values that she brought that she liked, including the idea of extending well wishes to somebody who is misguided, which means try to catch up here. What does this what's that term? Many Christians use that term as "I will pray for you," which you take out any of the supernatural elements of it, and you're just saying, "I'm going to extend well wishes to you. I wish you the best because you're misguided, and I hope that you can resolve your confusion." But that isn't really what's going on in Christianity, because Christianity is confusion. And what was really sad for me to hear from her was that she actively promotes the idea of subjectivism. And she doesn't understand. I mean, I was disappointed in that.
Yeah, Dawkins did ask the right question several times. He didn't really press her or demand the right answer, but he did ask her, well, do you may not know the story. Ayaan Hirsi recently announced she's converting to Christianity. She's a cultural Christian. In fact, Dawkins in another interview actually, well, I'm a cultural Christian. Kind of like cultural Jews don't believe in God. They aren't really Jewish, but they believe the tenets of the group. Dawkins asked her, do you really believe that Jesus was the Son of God and he rose from the dead? The things in the Bible, do you think they're factual? And she said, well, I choose to believe in Christianity. She kept saying this over and over again.
Yes.
It had nothing to do with the truth or falsity, and with the facts of the matter.
She would say something like, well, I'm not sure if it was exactly this, but it was the gist of it. Well, if you're talking about this different, I'm talking from a different perspective or a different plane of existence. And I think what she was trying to say and what she was saying was that kind of social plane of existence. Well, the idea, I mean, and from what I can understand of her, she's agreeing with other Christians. Yes, these miracles happened, even though they don't make any bit of sense. And because I have faith, and because I want to accept everything else that I see as good in this.
Yeah, I think she takes the factual part with a grain of salt. She's not that serious about it. If you listen to her answer, she's just not. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat real quick here. Hello, Petya. Hello, Narendra. We are glad you are here. And Jim Ashley says, that settles it. I think he mentioned this once before. He's never seen Dead Poet Society.
What?
That settles it. I'm adding Dead Poet Society to my must-see movie list. I'm surprised I haven't seen that film because I've followed director Peter Veer's films for years. Yes, you must see that film. You're right. Paul says he meant the meek. The left loves the meek. That's part of our discussion today, so I'm glad you brought that up, Paul. Amy, you're exactly right. Ayaan Hirsi became a Christian, a quote-unquote Christian, for cultural reasons. She believes that Christianity is necessary to Western civilization, to a civilized world, that life doesn't have meaning, that you can't answer the big questions, and this came up over and over again in their conversation. You can't answer the big questions. And she would say, well, so you believe in nothing. Do you remember the film The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra?
Yes, always.
When Ranger Brad says to the scientist, say, you don't believe those rumors about a lost skeleton, do you?
He says, I'm a science. I don't believe in anything.
It's such a great line because it's so horribly true about modern philosophy.
If you haven't seen Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, please do.
Yeah,
my apologies.
Add The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra to your list of comedies that you need to see.
Oh, it's so funny. I don't know. It's one of those films that you watch. It's sort of like Spinal Tap. You watch it so many times, but the fun, really the biggest moments of laughter is when you're done watching it days later and you start laughing at a particular line that comes up in your mind. It's
and like
stuff.
all great comedies, it's enormously quotable.
Yeah.
So you've got the one scientist in the film, the park ranger, where all of this stuff is happening. Yeah, asks him, "You don't believe in the rumors about this thing?" And he's, "Ranger Brad, I'm a scientist. I don't believe in anything." Which is so obviously backwards, and yet philosophically, ideologically, that's exactly what Ayaan Hirsi Ali was saying to Dawkins.
Subjectivism and skepticism or cynicism are two sides of the same exact coin. The idea that reason is not powerful, that you are, as a human being, you are unable to understand reality, to know it's real and what the truth is, and it's anti-reason. So, I mean, really. So,
yes. Yeah. Robin is a spoiler alert here. Robin says, "We threw out religion, but didn't have a philosophy to replace it with." Exactly right. Which is why on the socials, I asked the question that I'm going to ask you all, and you can answer this as we continue the discussion. 2 questions to you. Yes, I'm talking to you. What makes life worth living for you? What makes life worth living? And also, what are your top 3 things that you're grateful for? You may have already seen that on Facebook. Give me your answers. Throw them in the chat. I'm also going to read some of the ones we got earlier.
Great. Ayaan Hirsi Ali said she was absolutely right. When she asked Richard Dawkins, oh my God, that poor boy.
No sympathy. He should be better than this.
Basically we're leaving these kids, these young people without anything, a moral. She kept using the word moral vacuum, which she's absolutely right. And what do you have to replace it with? What kind of moral code, other than calling yourself a cultural Christian? What is there to replace it with? And he's like, well, secular humanism. And she's like, well, what does humanism have to do with it? What in humanism will give people the kind of, she didn't say moral certainty, but I think that's what she was trying to get at.
And maybe I missed it, but he didn't answer that.
No, he did not.
And she several times said explicitly this: well, for the atheist, there is nothing to believe in. You have nothing.
Yeah.
What do you mean you have nothing? You have everything. I should have linked to my post, Everything is Enough. Everything that exists, the entirety of reality, but Dawkins had nothing to answer to her.
Can I tell you what I think? If I could befriend Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and I would.
What would you tell her?
I would say there are certain concepts that you're going to be able to find in religion that you're not going to be able to find, obviously, in any kind of secular philosophy, except for objectivism, which has concepts such as hero worship and man worship and reason as your tool of survival. But more than that, reason as the basis that extends into virtuous behaviors, and virtues completely being directly being extensions from reason, from rationality. All of these virtues that we have, all of the spirituality that we have, the spirituality that you can find in works of Ayn Rand, from Anthem to The Fountainhead to, of course, Atlas Shrugged, to any of her writings. The one interesting thing, her and Richard had no answer to this, which was, well, what about music? What about art? You go up to something and you see this painting and you just start crying, or listening to this music, and isn't that somehow, that's the kind of spirituality that you would get from Christianity, from religion, and that could only happen with religion, right?
Right.
And he had nothing to say to that, except to say, psychology and neurology.
Which, if he had just said psychology and left it at that, that would have at least been something. But he's a hard determinist. Yes.
He's like it's like, I've got my gallant gallstone.
Yeah. And, yeah, exactly right.
So,
from this book, The Fountainhead. which we will read a bit from shortly.
Yeah, and but the idea of the things that you can't find in secular philosophy, only in objectivism, are things like the primacy of existence, the versus the primacy of consciousness. That should be taught to every 10-year-old in existence, because if it was, it would have been, life would be so grand. People would be so rational. If you had that distinction.
Or at a minimum, just don't teach them the opposite.
Yeah.
Because the primacy of existence is the default. Reality obviously comes first, unless you start teaching your children woo.
So when Ayaan is talking about, it's my faith. I know it's subjectivism, but it's my faith. And she's basically buying into the idea that Christianity is love, Christianity is inspiration, Christianity is a redemption story, Christianity is about heroes, something to be inspired by. And you walk into a cathedral and you look and you're like, oh, this is about Christianity. You know what? You got to take a reality check here, because all of these things were made by human beings. Whether, they were trying to figure out the grandest, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, so many people have a lot of artwork that is religious based, but I think it was the Piete that Leonard Peikoff talks about, and how it has nothing to do with supernatural entities or miracles or anti-reason. It has everything to do with the mother's love for her dead child. It's reality based. It's value based. It's based in the greatness of humanity, the greatness of man. And when you talk about Ayn Rand, you can't say anything. You can't mention Ayn Rand and not mention the fact that she was a hero worshiper. And she had spiritual values that you can find ample examples of in her own personal life, as well as her writings with Anthem and The Fountainhead. So you have something from The Fountainhead that you want to read.
I do, but you just mentioned hero worship.
Yeah. Which
means I have to jump to a message I received from somebody earlier today. I'm not going to name his name. He's what I would call one of the post-objectivists. Somebody who got into objectivism and fell out of it. And you'll know why that happened when I read this. Sends me a long email, basically a talk that he gave about what's wrong with objectivism. No, it wasn't Nathaniel Brandon. He is metaphysically challenged at this point. And I wrote back to him. I said, thanks for sharing, but if you're at all familiar with my podcasts or my writing, you must know that, and this is a quote from his talk, you're free. Okay. You're enough. Be individualist. Do whatever the hell you want. People are parasites. Unquote. Apparently that's what he got from objectivism. While clearly a recipe for misery and disaster, is the opposite of what I conclude from Ayn Rand's philosophy. There are people out there who think, well, if you're not religious, to hell with everyone and everything. Now that somebody got that out of objectivism, I cannot begin to imagine.
That's what's called cynical or personal egoism.
But that's the kind
not rational egoism.
That's the kind of thing that people who embrace religion think they're up against. I'm going to just read a bit from the introduction to The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. 25th anniversary edition, she wrote this introduction. Religion's monopoly in the field of ethics has made it extremely difficult to communicate the emotional meaning and connotations of a rational view of life. Just as religion has preempted the field of ethics, turning morality against man, so it has usurped the highest moral concepts of our language, placing them outside this earth and beyond man's reach. Exaltation is usually taken to mean an emotional state evoked by contemplating the supernatural. Worship means the emotional experience of loyalty and dedication to something higher than man. Reverence means the emotion of a sacred respect to be experienced on one's knees. Sacred means superior to and not to be touched by any concern of man or this earth, etc. But such concepts do name actual emotions, even though no supernatural dimension exists. And these emotions are experienced as uplifting or ennobling, without the self-abasement required by religious definitions. What then is their source or referent in reality? It is the entire emotional realm of man's dedication to a moral ideal. Yet, apart from the man-degrading aspects introduced by religion, that emotional realm is left undefined, without concepts, words, or recognition. And it is this highest level of man's emotions that has to be redeemed from the murk of mysticism and redirected at its proper object, man. Amy, you were saying to me earlier, this is what Ayaan Hirsi Ali has never read or never understood.
Yeah.
She needed to get a copy of The Fountainhead, especially anything after the 25th.
The forward to the 25th anniversary. I mean, if there's one thing I could send to her, it would be that, and say, you know what, listen, sister, call me up. We'll talk about it.
Read that introduction.
Because, I mean, and I thought about, oh my gosh, what would Christopher Hitchens have said if he were still alive? And, I don't know if he would have said this, but I would have said, maybe reminiscent of him, every time I hear the word of subjectivism, the idea that you cannot rely on your own reason, that you cannot find what's true, that there's nothing reliable in the universe, you can't make sense of anything, and therefore you just need to find somebody to obey because you need some form, you have a moral vacuum, as she would put it, and you need some kind of guidance. The first thing I see whenever anybody mentions subjectivism is rivers of blood, gore and bloodshed, because that's what it always comes down to. Subjectivism. It will always end up that way. No matter what you want to say, no matter how much, how many niceties you want to put in there, and talking about praying and well wishes. I mean,
Yeah, it always comes down to reason or force.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, imagine if Ayaan Hirsi Ali had read this. This is Gail Winan in The Fountainhead speaking. Well, I was thinking of people who say that happiness is impossible on earth. Remember, Ayaan Hirsi Ali's saying there's no meaning, there's no purpose without religion. Okay, he says, look how hard they try to find some joy in life. Look how they struggle for it. And why should any living creature exist in pain? By what conceivable right can anyone demand that a human being exist for anything but his own joy? Well, every one of them wants it. Every part of him wants it. But they never find it. I wonder why. They whine and say they don't understand the meaning of life. There's a particular kind of people I despise. Those who seek some kind of higher purpose or universal goal, who don't know what to live for, who moan that they must find themselves. You hear it all around us. That seems to be the official bromide of the century. Every book you open, every drooling self-confession. What seems to be the noble thing to confess, I'd think it would be the most shameful one. And then Howard Rourke answers him. He says, look, Gail. Rourke got up, reached out, tore a thick branch off a tree, held it in both hands, one fist closed at each end. Then, his wrists and knuckles tensed against the resistance, he bent the branch slowly into an arc. Now I can make what I want of it. A bow, a spear, a cane, a railing. That's the meaning of life. Well, your strength, your work. He tossed the branch aside. The material the earth offers you, and what you make of it.
Absolutely. And your work is not only, taking effort to achieve a goal. The work that you need to do is you need to figure out what kind of work you want to do. What's of value to you. And that can only be found within yourself. That's the only, you can only ask it of yourself and what you most love, and hold on to what you value, what you most love, what gives you inspiration, what moves you to tears, whatever it may be. Find that and go into that field of work
Yeah, and just in case it's not obvious, by work we don't mean your job, which should be in alignment with your work.
Yeah.
But we're talking about something a little broader than that here.
But even if it is just a job, you can still find meaning in it. You can still enjoy the process of making whatever you're dealing with better, of finding new ways and innovating and being proud of yourself for that. Even if it is flipping burgers or whatever it may be, you can find better ways to do it. You can be proud of yourself for the processes that you come up with in your own creative reasoning. So,
right.
But let me just, before we get too far ahead here, I just want to mention something that listening to Ayaan Hirsi, it just makes me very sad to hear her struggling through what she's struggling through and accepting really horrible ideas like subjectivism and faith. And when I say faith, I do not mean, hey, let's make a calculated risk and take action based on what we understand for now and then see how it goes and run the experiment. No. That's reason. I'm talking about accepting things that are abhorrent, that are dangerous, that are destructive to your life. Such as, so many things in Christianity. And I'm not just talking about the really bad things, like the Warren Jeffs and the or the Mormons or any of these more cultish versions of Christianity. I'm talking about the fact that it keeps leading you in the wrong direction with regard to morality. It keeps telling you morality is not based in what's real around you or your ability to apprehend with the truth using your reason. No. It is something that is coming down from a supernatural entity that you don't have any evidence for. And on top of that, we're going to have you, tell you that you are immoral and tell you that you are guilty and you are a sinner if you don't abide by moral ideas that may not make any sense at all. That is dangerous, harmful, and destructive. That's what I'm talking about.
There's an irony there that I pointed out in regard to purpose and meaning that applies to morality as well. There are people who will tell you, and Ayaan Hirsi, I'm sure, is one of them. Dawkins himself might be one of them, who will tell you that purpose and meaning and, as you say, ethics, well, if you get them just from reality, well, that's pragmatic. Whereas if you get them from another dimension, if you get them from God or God's representatives on earth, that somehow is more objective. Big guy, chair, white beard, somehow is more objective than you looking at the facts of reality and determining, based on my nature and the nature of the world, I need to be honest. I need to be productive. If I want success in life, I need to be just. I need to have integrity. I need to have pride. Somehow that commandment, being told by somebody, whether it's society or Yahweh or anybody else, is more objective than you looking firsthand at the facts and determining what's true about ethics? But Dawkins has no answer to that.
Try to guide yourself through some kind of wisdom that you are told that you cannot process intellectually or mentally or psychologically. Don't process it, just do it. Now, before I get farther into this, I just want to mention, I thought of Richard Dawkins and I thought of Ayaan Hirsi and I thought of Ayn Rand and how radically different Ayn Rand is as opposed to the new atheists. And what I mean by this is that, Ayn Rand, she was, Jewish. She was more of her family was more culturally Jewish. She decided to be an atheist by the time she was 12. It was no big deal. She prayed for some kittens to survive, and her prayer didn't have any effect. Therefore, she thought, there's not much to this whole praying thing. She didn't really think it was half-hearted about it anyway. But Ayn Rand did not start out in life as a cynical atheist. She did not start out in life, making fun of, as Ayaan Hirsi Ali would put it, just making fun and laughing at all the Christians. Ha ha ha, And she wasn't like that at all. As a matter of fact, when she described her relationship to her husband, Frank O'Connor, she described him as more of a militant atheist than she was. And, there's a story where he actually unrolled himself or went over to the public school. He was enrolled in Catholic school or religious school. He went across the street and enrolled himself into the public school. At age 6, he knew that there was something very wrong about going to a religious school. But, she was never in that mindset of cynicism. How did she put it? Cynicism is one of the most naive concepts because it's just kind of stupid. She was a hero worshiper. She was a man worshiper. When she saw great things, she didn't think, oh, this is the work of the Lord Jesus Christ or any supernatural entity. It was the work of human beings, of men and women with rational faculties who had that power to see beauty and she ended up explaining it in the Romantic Manifesto of all things. That's how she was able to write the Romantic Manifesto. That's how she was able to write it. She was not a cynic. She was and she had such a reverence for what is in us all, for our ability to reason, and all of our processes as human beings, our emotional mechanisms, everything, our ability to see beauty, our ability to express it, our ability to be artistic and creative, in all of its forms, including in the realm of business, which she thoroughly expressed in Atlas Shrugged. So yeah, it was just an interesting thought process I had about that. It's like, how is Richard and Ayaan not seeing any of this? How are they only finding beauty and the sublime in religion? So,
well, Jim has an answer. He says, if a religious person suddenly grasped the fact that an existent cannot create existence itself, their religious ideas would collapse. No more reason for all the rituals, no more need to observe the bureaucratic hierarchy of the church. I wish it was that simple, because you're right, but you're not right, because we all know, for example, religious scientists who know creation ex nihilo is a contradiction of everything that they count on to do their work. But, anything can happen, miracles, and I use the word miracles, but I use it allegorically or metaphorically. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're right, but of course you're also unfortunately wrong. We do have a couple folks who have started listing some of their favorite things for which they're grateful for or give meaning to their life. So let me shout that out real quick. Audrey Lee says, favorite thing, mankind. See, I love that because it's great contradiction to the message I said I received earlier. This person who took objectivism and Ayn Rand to be just, what's the word I'm looking for? A hatred of mankind, judgment of everybody as parasites, cynicism. No, Audrey Lee is absolutely right. Mankind. Other people, the second most valuable thing in your life. So very cool. And says, grateful for life. I don't take that for granted. I know some people who take their own lives for granted, and it's the strangest thing to me. So glad to hear that. Steve says, favorite things, the ocean, music, producing something. Close friends and family, driving on an open road. These might sound like a list of values, but they are also reasons to be passionate about life, reasons to live. I love in the earlier thread, Keith said, challenge, meaning of life. Purpose in life is challenge. I've been repairing things, for example. Some folks will know on Facebook. Paul in the chat knows better than most people what it means to take something and fix it or build it, create it. It's not just practical. It's a little tiny microcosm of your mastery over the world, over life, over matter, over things, your ability to live. So I appreciate that Keith says challenge. And then under his three favorite gratitudes, my abilities, my opportunities, my teachers. Again, nothing about a rationally selfish life that excludes other people in gratitude. The only difference is we care who are the good people and who are the bad people. First are the Christians who are told to love everybody. Yeah, they know better. Most of them won't go around embracing the guy with the gun in his hand. Unless, of course, it's the sheriff or the hero. So very good to see that. Anthony also says challenge earlier on the thread. He says, number 1, challenge. Number 2, meeting with amazing people. He says, I continue to learn and my teacher is still by my side. Again, I don't think anybody in our chat, but if anybody listening, anybody out there has the sense that there is a dichotomy, a rift, some split between a rational life and other people, oh my gosh, we count so much on reason in the minds of other people.
Yeah.
Division of labor, cooperation with other people, kindred spirits.
And we praise other people constantly.
Yes.
Or at least I hope so.
I love that the writer, Paul Gay, the screenwriter, Liar, Liar is one of the films he co-wrote, and it's so good. But anyway, he gives a long list. So if you haven't seen this post, facebook.com/Robert Nasir,
cool.
He gives an outstanding list, and he wraps up with these, we're talking many long, outstanding list of values, and he wraps it up with to Mo and Larry and Curly and Shemp. Remember, he's a writer, and he writes comedies. To Superman, there's the hero, to Ayn Rand. So he's talking about somebody who gets it. And it's a great list. You've got to read the whole thing. Some of them are fictional. Some of them are real life. All of them can give you the same thing. Outstanding.
You know, and I really kind of wonder if Ayaan and Richard had started out in life with heroes, and what would those heroes be if they had any. And I feel sad if they didn't, and I feel sad for anyone who doesn't. Of course, I mean, looking back, I always talk about Debbie Allen being my heroine, my hero, my dancer, actress, absolutely all-around beautiful lady who's still alive and still dancing. I love her. And, yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, Paul's in the chat on Facebook. He said, well, it's a long list, but size isn't everything. That's exactly what Paul would say. Exactly what I would expect.
I don't know.
Thank you for the list, though. It is awfully good.
Paul
the humor is awfully good, too.
Paul has some very large vintage equipment.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, earlier, Jim, we mentioned reading Ayn Rand, and I talked last week about how one of the great things about Ayn Rand's writing, her fiction, because, she only wrote 4 novels or 3 novels and a novelette, and you think, I have to keep rereading the same things over and over. But one of the great things about Ayn Rand is that her work merits rereading. It holds up.
Every time.
Something new every time. So Jim says, I finished reading Atlas Shrugged today. By the way, it was my second reading of it. My favorite book is The Fountainhead, but Atlas Shrugged is the greatest novel I've ever read. Jim, I'm sure you have that experience of the second time you read it, you're like, I didn't even notice how brilliantly she set up, not just, the main plot of the story, but all the little subplots that the second time you read, oh my gosh, that's what made that part so delicious. And oh my gosh, that part I didn't even notice the other time. And
I mean, her mind was so
good.
So integrated and so complex. I mean,
Christopher Smith apparently is overwhelmed. He says, Atlas Shrugged isn't even a novel. I don't know what the hell it is.
It's 3 novels in one book.
I think it's because it's a novel plus.
Yes.
It's a novel, and it's also, Andrew Bernstein used to call or probably still calls The Fountainhead the Old Testament and Atlas Shrugged the New Testament. So they're Bible replacements. And I'm okay with that.
Speaking of religion and objectivism, so again, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, she was like, you know what, we need to be more patient. We need to give each other good wishes. We need to be open to people when they're not quite seeing the truth. That if you take that rationally, it makes sense. And she, and she needed a sense of community. And she actually started out with saying that she had a personal experience, and she was going through a lot of rough times, and she was very depressed for years, and she was self-medicating and going to therapists and everything. And finally, she found a therapist who said, it sounds like you're lacking spiritual values or that you have a spiritual bankruptcy. And she claims that that's what got her into questioning whether or not she thought Christianity was valid or might be of value to her life. And which, by the way, I think, as an aside, I think this is ultimately, 10 years down the line, you're going to see Ayaan Hirsi. If she hasn't found Ayn Rand, she's just going to revert back to cynicism, and it's going to get ugly, and it's not good. So I'm very sorry, Ayaan Hirsi. I hope that I'm sending you best wishes, and I'm so sorry you're misguided, and I'm very much open to you reaching out to us if you're watching. But the idea of religion and philosophy, I do like this one particular aspect of it. Obviously community, obviously having patience for each other, obviously praising when you see the virtues in other people. Absolutely, we need to do this more in objectivism. And we need rituals. And so, actually, we may need another term for rituals, or maybe another term for church other than, say, study group. But right now, you're watching this podcast is a ritual. It's a habit that you have, that hopefully you're getting inspiration from, and this is why you want to watch us, is to find the more meaning in your life, different perspectives on how to really get the most juice out of your values, and this is a spiritual ritual. I am now proclaiming it on the 2nd of June 2024. 5 minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir.
I know for some people that's true, although looking at the chat, I think for some it's just fun.
Well, that's part of it too.
And I know that's true because there's some really funny stuff in the chat.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm where to begin? Well, but Jim wanted to clarify. Of course, I don't mean that their religious ideas would collapse right away if you got them to accept the right premise. I should not have used the word suddenly. Rather, it would be gradual. But if they did fully grasp the fact that an existent cannot create existence itself, they would see that one particular existent, in their view being God, could not have created existence because existence would include God himself. Jim, you're right logically, but you almost already have to be there to accept that premise. If you are a believer, the contradiction doesn't matter because you're right. That's true about everything. Things can't create everything because but God is different, and God is eternal. He's always been there. So he can create existence because he's not really an existent. He's God,
Yeah, I mean, talk about your circular logic. Audrey in the Facebook, she says, she gives a zinger. Cleaning a vacuum cleaner makes you a vacuum cleaner.
That's right. Cleaning your vacuum cleaner makes you a vacuum cleaner. Yes, and God can pull himself out of his own navel. God can do anything. And if it's completely contradictory and makes no sense to you, well, that's because you're just human. Yeah, so, Jim, you're right, but I think on some level you also know that that wouldn't actually get it done to a true believer, because a true believer is a true believer. Now, before we get too much into it, before we get to the top of the hour, I did actually script this whole episode, and I have not read any of this material because I know I really just wanted to have a conversation with Amy and with you all in the chat.
Thank you very much, sir.
But I am going to read the last little bit here. Because we've gotten very objectivist-y. This is not an objectivist show. This is an Amy and Robert show, but we are objectivists. So, of course, we're all about objectivism. The point is, we're not speaking for the philosophy, and we are speaking to the broader audience. But I have said before to my objectivist kindred spirits, if objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, if it really is the first fully accurate and complete owner's manual for life, then it stands to reason that, other things being equal, objectivists should be among the most happy, successful, gracious, cheerful, the most enthusiastic, the most competent, the most benevolent people on earth. So let me add this. As those who understand and recognize and appreciate values, those who can see the objective value of all the nearly limitless goods and services and opportunities and entertainments and health and wellness resources and artistic beauty that surrounds us and architectural magnificence. And I could go on and on and on, and this stuff surrounds us all day, every day. It stands to reason that we should also be among the most grateful, the most thankful people in the world. I certainly am. I appreciate this life, and I appreciate all of you, and I refuse to take either for granted. Ayaan Hirsi Ali is wrong. Religion does not have a monopoly on meaning. You can write meaning into fiction and you can get meaning from fiction. You can write meaning into your myths and you can get meaning from myths. But reality is the source of fiction. Reality is the source of myth. Imagination and creativity are simply the rearranging of stuff, of the elements of reality. There's no other place for that content to come from. And it is life. It is the facts of life. Our thoughts, our experiences, the things we choose, the people we include in our experiences, in our value hierarchy, in our hearts and minds, that are the source of all meaning. There is nowhere else and nothing else for it to come from. It is that simple. Everything is enough. That is my answer to Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
I wish Richard would have learned that from Sam Harris. Sam at least understands you can get morals from reality. I have issues with his method, but he's at least making the point.
Yeah.
Read his book, The Moral Landscape, which I still have to finish. That is the answer. I'm the answer. You are the answer. Here, let me grab a copy of Anthem.
Oh, I was going to read this. Let's see. What do you read?
Oh, just the beginning of chapter 11.
Go ahead, because I picked out some quotes.
From Anthem?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, you're reading from chapter 11 too. You'll be reading a little further forward.
Okay.
Chapter 11, Anthem. Ayn Rand. Oh, spoiler alert. If you haven't read Anthem yet, this chapter, it's not the last chapter, it's the second from last chapter, but it is a massive spoiler. So for the next 30 seconds, turn down the sound or skip forward.
Yeah.
Chapter 11, Anthem. I am. I think I will. My hands, my spirit, my sky, my forest, this earth of mine. What must I say besides? These are the words. This is the answer. I stand here on the summit of the mountain. I lift my head and I spread my arms. This, my body and spirit. This is the end of the quest. I wished to know the meaning of things. I am the meaning. I wished to find a warrant for being. I need no warrant for being, and no word of sanction upon my being. I am the warrant and the sanction.
And it goes on. This I really like. And he uses we instead of I, because in this society, the individual pronoun has been written out of their language because they are so collectivistic and so backwards.
So this is earlier in the story.
And I like this. We sat still and we held our breath, for our face and our body were beautiful. Our face was not like the faces of our brothers, for we felt no pity when looking upon it. Our body was not like the bodies of our brothers, for our limbs were straight and thin and hard and strong, and we thought that we could trust this being who looked upon us from the stream, and that we had nothing to fear with this being. He's looking in the mirror. And I love it.
Yeah, there are no mirrors in this society, this collectivist society. So he's wandering in a forest he's not supposed to be in, and he sees his reflection in the water.
But it's one of these feelings that I get when I see myself in the mirror, is that I have no fear of this being, of myself. I have had a habit in the past of talking to myself in the mirror when I was a lot younger. And sometimes I still do, just for fun, because I'm a good friend to myself. And that's what life for yourself should be. You should be the best friend to yourself. You should be able to work with your own mind, to introspect, to understand, not just the world around you, but how you evaluate that, what the words are for evaluating that, and to find clarity in your thoughts. That's what is really important, and eventually to find moral clarity in your thoughts. And I'll just say, Ayaan Hirsi Ali is no longer looking in the mirror. And it sounds like she hasn't been able to, and she's been very depressed, and gosh, I really, for anybody, especially her, I really wish her rationality. I wish her a good relationship with herself, positive self-talk, as it were, that kind of rational form of psychology. And unfortunately, she's not going to find that in Christianity. Maybe some forms of it that's been smuggled in from, more positive psychology, but as it is with the New Testament and the Old Testament, there isn't any there. But and then finally, the last quote from Anthem: "It is my mind which thinks, and the judgment of my mind is the only searchlight that can find the truth." That is reverence for oneself. Yes. That's what she's talking about in Ayn Rand is talking about also in the 25th anniversary of the foreword to The Fountainhead. That reverence for yourself, that liking yourself, that appreciating what you have, your faculty, your reason, and back to what you have in your faculty of reason. You were talking about what can you not live without, or what are the things that what makes life worth living, and what are the top 3 things you are grateful for? And I have my own. I won't share everything, but I have my own personal list. a lot to do with this guy over here.
Oh, well.
And
it's what the guy who sent me the message earlier was completely missing.
Yeah.
Was, if reason is the highest value in a man's life and your means of survival, and all the rest of your psychology, consider how Ayn Rand talks about your emotions, including your highest emotions, are what informs and gives you the reward of all of that, then it stands to reason that other people, kindred spirits, anybody who is a producer and not a destroyer, has got to be the highest values in your life. Whether it is your partner, your soulmate, your husband, your wife, your children, even your parents, depending on the relationship you have with them, but your peers, your coworkers, your barista, just all of the people, the important people who make life worth living. This idea that selfishness means other people aren't important is just bizarre.
Yeah.
Just bizarre. Yes, you are the center of your own universe. You are not your whole universe.
You get to live with other people who potentially have rational values.
It's why one of my mottos that you've heard me say before is, we are surrounded by miracles, not least of which is ourselves. And you know what I mean by miracles? All of the products of a division of labor society, of human reason. In any room that I walk into, if I'm not in the middle of the forest, I see things, and not just objects, but structures and paint on the walls, just magnificence. In a million years I couldn't have produced on a desert island, or even a desert island on my own. This is what people can do for you. This is what people have done for you. And I cannot help but live a rationally selfish life with a constant state of joy and gratitude for that. We are surrounded by miracles. So I was laughing a little bit because the chat continues to be funny. Greg Lewis says, aren't heroes what they make sandwiches out of? Greg should know better than to make a sandwich joke. For people who don't know, he's been to our home and he's brought bread. We have broken bread he's bought. He is a master baker.
No, he's created, not just bought, but...
Oh, did I say bought? Brought is what I meant. Yes. So I will not make another master baker joke, but you're asking for it by putting that kind of humor in the chat.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I like I say, oh my gosh. I'm sorry Ayaan Hirsi has experienced a lot of cynicism around the new atheist groups.
She's been through a lot.
And but I'll tell you, if you want to take another another effort, make another effort for this and what you're trying to find in terms of community, in terms of well-wishing, in terms of praise, in terms of hero worship, in terms of and on top of that, I think also she's had children. She sees how children value all the things around them, which can be very inspiring and very delightful. And then she sees her new atheist friends, and she's like, God, why are they so upset and unhappy? Why am I so unhappy?
Really?
So, you know what? Go out and read Ayaan Hirsi.
Really? Read the early Ayn Rand and Kira's Viking, at the end of which he toasts to a life that is an end unto itself. I have 2 Post-it notes for the week. As you know, I always put up a Post-it note to remind myself of the things we've talked about and the things I need to remind myself of. Stuff I already know, for example, that I may not be living as deeply, richly, consistently as I could. Well, my first Post-it note just says live. That's ridiculous. What do you mean live? That's kind of everything, isn't it? And that's the whole point. When I look at the word live, I remind me, am I living? Well, of course I'm living. Well, wait, am I living the way I want? Am I living as richly as I could? Am I living with as much passion as I could? We talked about changing your state. What happens when you sit up straight, raise your chin up, open your eyes a little wider? Your mental state changes. What? The body doesn't lead the mind leads the body. Well, it works both ways. So when I see live, all of those things happen. I remember not to take anything for granted, but my other Post-it note for the week says, if you don't press anything, the next episode starts on its own. I saw that thrown in at the end of a comic, some funny thing that had nothing to do with this, but the character at the end, after the joke, says, if you don't press anything, the next episode starts on its own. It's kind of existentialist kind of comic. And for some reason, that quirky line stuck with me. Now, for folks who use streaming services, most of you do, to watch television, and YouTube kind of has a version of this. Yeah, you watch a video, you watch a movie, you watch a television episode, and if you don't press anything, the next episode just starts on its own.
Yep.
And I thought, well, there's a metaphor for something. And it's true. You don't want to be too much on autopilot.
Right.
You definitely want to be directing things. I turn off autoplay or auto whatever every time I can, but it is true that if you don't press anything, if you don't choose what comes next sometimes will turn out to be fun. Sometimes you can afford to do that. You have paid in advance. We talked about that when we talked about unconditional love. There's a leap. Sometimes you've paid in advance. Well, I've earned this time, this moment, this recreation, this relaxation. I can let whatever happens next happen. Most of the time, that's not what you want. So I love that reminder to myself. Is it wrong to say I love something that I put up myself? Well, I didn't originally write it. Originally, it was just a cute thing. But I love it. If that's useful to you, write it on a Post-it note, put it up on your wall, put it on your bathroom mirror, put it by your desk, someplace you will see it. Think about it a few times this week. It'll get stuck in your head, and when you need it, the wisdom, the lesson, the quirky thing will be there. And there we go. Oh, there's more in the chat that I need to read, but we're running late. We're going to wrap it up. There is meaning in spending an hour and 7 minutes with kindred spirits on things you find either interesting, amusing, wise, or just funny. Mm-hmm. And thank you for the funny chat and your ideas. I know I missed reading a few of them, but I will be going over them going them over them. Where did that come from? Going over them when YouTube makes them available. It usually takes 24 hours before the chat reappears, but it will be there. If you are listening to this after the fact, you know we are available on YouTube, we are available on Facebook Live, but also on all of the podcasting platforms. If you didn't know that, now you do. You
oh
can
my
listen.
gosh. Wait, all the podcasting platforms?
How do we make that possible? Well, it does cost a little bit of money, the service we use that syndicates our show, and that's where you come in. Thank you. Thank you to our patrons. To those of you who are patrons of the show, no new patrons this month, but we lost one. Somebody slipped off our, Patreon lets me know. So I need somebody to fill that spot, fill that lacuna. I don't even know what a lacuna is, but people talk about filling it. Seriously, though, if you want to help us keep the lights on here in Studio 2 at Casa de la Nasir, you could do that by going to patreon.com/Robert Nasir, or just go to robertnasir.com where links to that and everything else you want to know, or at least links to everything else you want to know, they're all there.
That is so wonderful of us.
That is so wonderful of us. I will say that to you. I'm not afraid to be a little bit cocky. In fact, I practice the virtue of selfishness.
I practice the virtue of pride.
The virtue of selfishness almost sounds nasty on Marquis de Sade's birthday. But that's what it is. Folks, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. Thank you for, especially those of you I still see in the chat who have stuck it out. Audrey Lee reminds us, or tells us, lacuna just means gap. Good, then I will keep using it in that way and synonymous with gap. Thank you for filling that gap in our finances by being a patron. And we will see you next Sunday. That's it. I'm done. Thank you for joining us. We wish you every success that you so richly deserve. I know you do, you damn good people, you. And that's why, as always, and with a little bit extra this time because we went extra long, somebody will make an extra long joke. We wish